this afternoon, and we're going to have a conversation about the Mentors in Violence Prevention Programme. I've been asked by a number of people across the UK, particularly down in England, people working in the violence prevention world, to learn more about the Mentors in Violence Prevention Programme, which we will call now the MVP programme. I'm delighted today to be joined by my good friend and my colleague, Alan Heisterkamp, who is in Iowa, in the United States. I first spoke to Alan in 2010 when I was looking at implementing the MVP program up here in Scotland during my time with the Violence Reduction Unit. And I was told by the MVP curator, Dr. Jackson Katz, that Alan was the go-to person. He was the font of all knowledge when it comes to implementation of the MVP program. And can I just say that Jackson wasn't wrong. And I eventually met Alan at a conference, I think it was in Boston in 2012, where we just hooked up. We just became good friends. And I have the privilege of working with Alan almost on an annual basis, going across to stay with his family in his home in Iowa. I've even played baseball with Alan, Field of Dreams. How cool is that? We've all seen the film. I've been there and played baseball. And Alan's really helped me out a lot, professionally and personally as well. And he's just a fantastic friend. And I even managed to get Alan into a kilt when he came to my wedding in 2017. And I have the pictures as well. So today's conversation is really, we're going to take a look at MVP. We're going to describe what the MVP model is. And we'll link it to the current challenges we have in the UK and what challenges young people are facing in our schools. We're probably going to talk more about MVP as a program that is supporting high schools rather than, MVP supports sports, it supports military organizations, but we'll probably focus more looking at high schools and potentially colleges and universities as well. We'll be looking at MVP as a tool to support not just reducing violence in society, but helping young people learn to be successful learners. We all want young people to be successful in their life. So Alan, welcome to the conversation today. Can I get you just to tell the audience a bit about you, what you do, and how you got involved in the MVP program?
Sure. Hello. Hey, Graham, thank you for, hosting this conversation, and it means so much. And I would just echo back at you. It's been a great journey with you so far. When we first met in person back in Boston, as you mentioned in 2012, it was really, felt like I was just kind of in midstream in really learning and understanding more about the influence and the power of the Mentors of Violence Prevention model, the MVP model. And for me, it started back in when I was a high school principal in Sioux City, Iowa. And this would have been in the late 1990s. So 98, 99, I began my career in education and shifted from that of a school counselor to a high school principal. And in terms of the just geographic kind of background, the school in which I was working was, by Iowa standards, it was a very large, diverse high school, and it is a wonderful place to work yet today. The students come from all walks of life, and there were all kinds of issues that, as a school master or a school principal, that you address and you deal with, all with the idea of helping really cultivate that positive school culture where kids can learn and thrive and grow. But as a school administrator, I had to admit that there were so many issues I felt like I was just chasing. I was never really getting out in front of, or never really preventing incidences from happening. In other words, it was not uncommon for conversations to turn into arguments, to turn into a push or a shove, and then ultimately maybe turn into a physical act of aggression. And it was really really confounding and really problematic for the environment, the school. I just wasn't ever satisfied with it. I never felt like I said, that I could ever get out in front of those behaviors. And it was quite obvious that it was nothing that one person was going to accomplish by him or herself. And I absolutely happened to be introduced to the MVP model through a parent who had two boys in our high school. her background was in social work, and she actually worked in the victim service arena as a social worker. And so she served primarily women in our community who were leaving abusive relationships and needing the care and shelter of the organization, the services that were provided. And I knew professionally as an educator that those services were there, but it was not something that was on my radar. My lens was really from the educational lens, but she helped me and really nurtured it and mentored me in thinking about how our educational system, our educational enterprise could be much more engaged and involved with some of the social and emotional skills and strategies that were obvious to me that our students in general were lacking across the board. She had the connection, had done her research, and was very curious herself about Jackson Katz's work in the MVP model. And so together we began to explore, and it became increasingly obvious for me that this model, this practice, if you will, of the MVP model was going to revolutionize the way in which we address school culture and climate in our building, and ultimately I felt could have a profound impact on schools, primarily high schools, across the state of Iowa. And what helped that come to a head for me professionally was the horrific incident that took place at Columbine High School in Colorado in April 20th, 1999. That incident, for me being a young high school principal, was a turning point. It was a moment in time for me where I began to question, are our schools safe? Why would two young men feel the need or the desire to accumulate weapons and ammunition and create explosives for the intent of hurting and harming innocent people in the high school in which they were attending? That to me was really a profound educational experience to be in, and it made me question the things that we were doing. And so this was happening simultaneously while I was really dissatisfied with the ways in which we were addressing behaviors and social issues within our school. And I looked around in the other school districts in our state, and even for that matter across the United States, and there really wasn't a concerted effort or anything systemically embedded into our practices. I would be the first person to say that our colleagues in the younger grades in our elementary or your primary schools there in the UK, their approach to education is so much more of a whole child approach. In other words, that the social and emotional learning pieces of a young person in their growth and development is parceled together with the academic instruction. The two are one and the same. It was painfully obvious to me that we, as an educational system, as kids aged up, those conversations and discussions around the social issues that have a lot of meaning and relevance to young people, young adolescents particularly, were oftentimes pushed to the side. And those conversations may surface within the context of a health class, which by our standards was really a class only required to take for half of an academic school year. And in some cases, students could opt out. So it was a very poor model that we had established educationally to allow or provide conversations around really serious topics and issues about, relationships and about, what I think and believe about who I am as a person, my identity, what I value, the values that I as a young person have grown up with, and I bring to the school the school building, I bring into the school context, and it was painfully obvious that we were not doing our students service. We weren't doing them justice in terms of really making these issues that were important to them front and center. And this model, this MVP model, Graham, helped me begin to rethink our approach to secondary education.
Yeah, I think it's something that, I've heard you speak about that Columbine story so many times, Alan, and you can just tell it's 21 years this week, I think, that took place. And you're so right to talk about culture. We often think culture is the fancy slogan written on the high school wall or the organizational wall, but culture takes work. It takes effort to do that. And, that's what I think you were starting to play with at the time, was how do we start to create this positive, supportive culture that allows us to talk about violence and abuse, but we involve the young people. We don't talk at them, we talk with them. I think it's a really good way to bring in the conversation about what MVP is. It is about sort of creating that safe, supportive environment where these conversations can have. So really, just to carry that on, the Mentors in Violence, the MVP program, was a program created back in the mid-90s by a friend of ours, Dr. Jackson Katz, who and he would identify MVP as a leadership program. We don't tell young people how to behave, we talk about leadership. It's a leadership program that uses a creative bystander approach to support prevention. It was a program that was initially focused on male athletes, in the sporting context, MVP, most valuable player. It was used to really engage male athletes to speak out against things like domestic violence, sexual harassment, bullying, initiations, and whatever. And to use that leadership, that role model these men would have in their sports teams to set the tone, the culture for these settings. And the school model that Alan and I will discuss in this conversation really grew from this work. And it's a program that now doesn't just involve men, it involves boys, men, girls, women, whoever, a whole raft of people to talk about a whole range of issues. And the program places individuals and young people in high schools into the role of the bystander. And within the MVP context, we define the bystander as the friend, the workmate, the colleague, the classmate, the teammate. It's within the circle of friends, because that's what we want to focus on. We don't just focus on stranger situations, we bring it right into the community. And this conversation, it takes away the traditional victim perpetrator binary that we often have. We often look at people as problems or potential problems, or victims or potential victims. And sometimes that can be quite a disengaging conversation. So one of the good things about MVP, it invites people into conversations around violence and abuse. And we know that young people here in the UK suffer, are faced with lots of challenges, such things as social media usage, confusions around early relationships, how to behave, what to expect in a relationship, peer expectations for boys in particular, norms around masculinity, issues around pornography, looking at trauma in early years and how these can play out in their daily lives. And all of these issues that we talk about in MVP are not just about issues that take place in schools, but they can creep into and permeate into the individuals' communities as well. And it's also highlighted before, MVP is not just a program that is there to reduce violence, it's there to improve learning. There's Alan, a high school teacher, myself, I'm a former police officer, and what thing do we share in common? We share the desire to create healthy relationships. If we build relationships in society, violence will come down because we're getting on with each other. And if we reduce violence, if we improve relationships in a school setting, we'll improve attainment. So we share the agenda. So that's something to really think about. Alan, have I missed anything? How you would describe MVP?
Yeah, I love the piece about how we frame MVP as a conversation. And when you think about this, and this again, going back to educationally, why these conversations or the process of addressing social and emotional issues within the young person that are developmentally and age appropriate, why it was aging out, or why those discussions were stopping, because when kids get into the age of adolescence, there is this natural there's this natural tendency to begin to move away from or apart from those adult structures and systems and support individuals that you as young people, we come to rely on and to be a part of our growth and development. But the age of 12, 13, and 14 begins this natural separation, if you will, that young people start to feel that independence. And so in thinking about this model, Graham, as you've described, it was important for us in the early stages to not have this be a model where the adults in the building are sitting in front of the classroom as the adult expert or the adult provider of information onto the students, because students were not going to, that wasn't going to be received in our opinion, was not going to be received in a way that we wanted it to be discussed and talked about in that dynamic. And so our approach has always been thinking about high school students ages 13 to 18 years of age, in that range, that those 17 and 18-year-old young people, they want the same things that in a school environment or within relationships that we want as adults. We want that healthy, respectful. I want a school that's safe. They want a school that's safe. They want a school where they can come and see their friends and learn and engage and have fun and be in activities. That's what they want. But up until MVP, Graham, we never gave them a platform to say that. And if a student did say something out loud about that, they may have been shunned or kind of silenced by their peers because they're thinking, well, who are you? When deep down at our very core, we want the safety and security and the connections and the belonging that we were meant to thrive on as human beings. And so this model was a model that we wanted to really coach and train older students to help facilitate these conversations with near peers. And to me, that made all the difference in the world, because it would have been easier for us to have identified a group of students in our schools who did the right thing, got good grades, had good attendance. It would have been easy to grab those students and say, hey, we want you to go through a training, and then we want you just to kind of model those things in your daily life. All right, well, that might move us maybe 1 inch on this mile-long journey. So we felt it was important to not just train students, but train students to train others. This train the trainer model was an approach that was not being utilized in the violence prevention, bullying, gender-based violence prevention arena, because up until that point in time, myself included, those are conversations that experts have. Those are conversations that those, with degrees and experience in victim services and prevention were. And yes, not to take away from those individuals, those professionals in our communities, like the woman who introduced me to MVP. I mean, incredibly capable and intelligent. What a leader in our community, right? But she knew that with my help and support, we could actually get this information not in our heads, but also in the heads of students. And we could set the stage for conversations to happen with students and younger peers in that near peer relationship, and have conversations that we as adults, we could never really have, and not have it be as meaningful. And for a young person to hear from an older peer who they look up to saying things like, these are the things that I value in my school. These are the mistakes and challenges that I experienced when I was a first year student in this building, and learning and talking about those errors of misjudgment, or maybe being a part of a situation where they themselves were the person who was causing the bullying or the harassment, and having this revelation and realization as they've gotten older, from age 13 to 17, that's really not what this is about. That doesn't build culture. That doesn't help any of us, and it has a negative effect on our climate, and nobody thrives in that arena. So it was important for us to not let this be a model that was delivered by adults, but delivered by students with the support of the adults in those buildings.
Yeah, and that's that's an important aspect of MVP. And MVP is a program that is, whilst initially it's teachers and community partners that are trained by the likes of Alan and myself and other MVP trainers, the actual delivery of the program is done by high school mentors, the young people in their second last year of high school. And just think of the power, the power of the role model that we are going to see in these occasions. And both Alan and I, advocate using high school mentors to deliver sessions, and we'll talk about sessions shortly, but sessions to younger pupils. And I think there's many benefits. As Alan talked about, these young people have influence. The mentors are not always going to be always be the usual suspects. They're often the best mentors are the ones that are the best influencers, the ones that you would think, oh, maybe not, we shouldn't use that person because they've done something bad in the past. No, they have got the ability to influence in the school, and we can train them and help them support in their journey. So, the approach using the high school mentor is not only good for the actual delivery of the program, but think about the skills and attributes that these young leaders in the school are actually going to develop for future. There's young people leave school, they go to university, they go to college, they go into the workplace, they have children of their own. So we are really developing, and the evidence we're finding in the US and finding in Scotland in particular is that the mentors are the ones that are really grasping this and really benefiting so much from this program. So that's a brief background to what the MVP program is. It's a leadership program using a bystander lens. What MVP isn't simply a program that teaches young people to intervene in situations. As Alan talked about, MVP is a program that creates conversations. And my view, when you start to create conversations amongst young people, you start to bring the healthy norms to the surface. That we have more in common than which divides us notion that is often talked about. I love when we have conversations with young people, and I've seen it when I've worked with Alan in America, where we see the reassurance. Peer influence is massive with young people, and we all have this desire. I think C.S. Lewis talked about the inner circle. We all have the desire to be part of that inner circle. So often we have young people behaving in certain ways that are completely contrary to their own personal values and beliefs for the desire to fit in. And what we're doing with MVP is we're just flipping the narrative. We're bringing the healthy norms to the surface, and the young people are thinking, hey, that's what I think, that's what I believe in. So yeah, I'm going to follow that. So MVP is not just a program that teaches people to overcome the bystander effect, although we do talk about that. It's a program that creates the conversation, where we start to build the team around these issues, and then we equip people with the skills and the qualities to be able to intervene in situations. Alan, anything else you want just to finish this part off?
And no, appreciate that, the analysis that the conversation is key. And then I think what we can talk more about in detail are what are those skills and strategies, and how do you change the narrative, and how do we help embed those questions around specific topics for our students to contemplate and to think. What do I observe? How's this make me feel? Have I seen these before? How might have these behaviors impacted me in ways that I hadn't even paid much attention to? And then most importantly, you coming up with some of the, explicit strategies, which oftentimes translate into a word, a phrase, an action, an intention, a way in which I can respond as opposed to doing nothing, that I am empowered to do something because I know that my peers are thinking the same thing, that these behaviors that we're observing are not the behaviors that really help us as human beings or as classmates or as teammates, whatever, but I have now the social kind of support, or that reassurance that we can make the situation better together.
Okay, so let's end this part of the conversation. Next time we come back, we're going to talk about some typical MVP situations and talk about some of the aims of MVP.